13th, the first meeting of 2025. Okay. Call it to order, and what we will do is introduce any late items, if anyone has any late items. No late items. Okay, then we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. That the agenda of the regular council meeting for January 13 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Gravender, seconded by Councillor Forrester. All in favor? So I guess I only have to look one way. And I'd like to note that I'm your hostess tonight because Mayor Pond is in Prince George at the Natural Resources Convention. And we have Councillor Reed Skelton Morvan on Zoom as well. He's in Vancouver, and Councillor Wade Neese is in transit right now, so he will not be here tonight. So thank you very much. And if there are any comments from the public regarding agenda items, don't everyone rush up at once. Okay, seeing as there's none, we'll just move on to the consent agenda. And the consent agenda, as you can see, is made up of a number of items. And if there's anyone here wishes to pull any out at the time and have a discussion about them or give us further direction and discussion, I'll take requests now. Oh boy, we're going to be out of here fast. Okay, then a motion to accept the consent agendas as presented. Councillor Forrester, Councillor Adey.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chair.
Pardon me?
Just a quick comment, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm particularly pleased. There's lots of good things here, and I encourage people to read them. But I'm particularly pleased with the effort between the different organizations: Prince Rupert, Port Edward, North Coast. I want to say Transition Society, but it's not, Regional District, with regards to the joint application to UBCM for Indigenous Cultural Safety and Humility Training Program. Good to see. Hopefully they'll get it.
Thank you. One thing I wouldn't mind pointing out from the consent agenda is that the fantastic effort that city staff, the rec center, Nicole, as well as the fire department, the RCMP with the Sherbrooke apartment, how it all came together so quick, and that it was an amazing response to a very tragic event. And I just wanted that pointed out. Councillor Edey.
Since we're commenting, I would also like to note we're being asked for a letter of support to facilitate the raising of funds for equipment for the urology at the hospital. And letters of support are easy to say yes to. So there's a level on which they're symbolic, but I also think it's really important to note that when these things are successful and equipment gets put in place, it's one way of laying a marker that keeps those services in-house locally. And I think that's something that we should be very energetically supporting.
Definitely, thank you very much. And on that note too, as Councillor Adey just said, one thing that we find with the doctors is they're amazed at the support this community puts out for different things from different organizations, and that it just goes on and on and on. Okay. And we voted on that, didn't we? Yeah, okay. Gray hair, just like the mayor.
You have a mover and a seconder. You just need to confirm it.
Pardon me? We need to vote. Oh, all in favor of the consent agenda. I thought we had. Okay, we'll move on to reports now. Report from the Manager of Communications, Engagement and Social Development, a request for directions on replacement of Mariners Memorial Wall. recommendation that council approves the removal and replacement of the memorial wall in Mariners Park to an area just adjacent to its current location in order to enable a covered seating area to be installed for public benefit. And our communications officer is on stage.
Just here to answer any questions that you might have regarding the report. Essentially, it's something that we discussed previously was the Japanese Canadian Legacies Project. So that's the covered structure. At the time that we approved the grant proposal through council, you had requested there'd be 2 options provided for the project to go, and we're just asking for clarification on which project, and that involves resiting of the memorial wall, which was approved for redesign this year in the 2025 budget.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Seconder, Councillor Adey, then go ahead.
Just a question. I was looking at the diagram that came with it, and I went down on the weekend, had a look at the wall itself, and you know, I'm not an engineer, but it's pretty clear that it's in dire need of some renovations at the very least. So that's not the question I have. I was trying to make sense of where the covered area would be. So that's part 1 of the question. And part 2, there's part of the planning is to include the construction of a band shell. But I'm if I'm correct, I'm understanding that's not currently part of the plans that we're dealing with. But I would like to know where that might be as well.
Sure. So the band shell project is part of a broader planning for Rotary Park that not Rotary, Mariners Park, that includes the Rotary Club. And so they're working on developing a siting for the band shell. It's in very early days, and the plan will be brought forward to council before the next couple of months or so. But that basic drawing that was provided in the report that shows kind of an area for the band shell is based on an early drawing so that they could apply for some funding. So that's some contextual piece there. And then your other question regarding the covered area. So essentially what we're requesting is to be able to relocate the wall that exists there now, the memorial wall, to the other side of the pathway. And then to be able to put the covered area in where the memorial wall exists now, just because it would provide a better opportunity for public to kind of sit, contemplate, and to look at the water. And the memorial wall would then be on the other side. So those coming to look at the wall and the memorial to their loved ones could then go and sit and kind of have a contemplative area to sit. If that makes sense.
Is there any idea how high this covered area is going to be from a sight line point of view for views from other side?
At this point, we do need to confirm the siting of the project first prior to the design. So we haven't gotten to that yet, but I can note it for sure that preserving sightlines is a priority, and we can do that. I think that early discussions had intended for it to be something that you could see through. So there will be a roof, but you'd be able to see through to the water. Okay,
and it's going to be sort of closer to the bank for the band shell area, so it's not going to impede viewing of any band shell or that?
No, it's in a different area. The band shell proposed area is closer to the Mariners, the pointing statue.
Okay.
And similar to the memorial from Japanese Canadian Legacies, we're also in discussions with having the back end of the band shell be able to open up so that it's not obstructing the water views as well. So that's definitely been a consideration in all of the design conversations.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so all in favor? Thank you. I got to keep remembering to look over my shoulder. Okay, the next is another report from our communications manager. It's a report on development of the memorial programming update.
Sure. So this is essentially just looking to council for some direction regarding a memorial program policy that will be an administrative policy. Currently, there is not a set policy in place that council or the city uses to determine what available memorial program we have. We've done a bit of a review of what available programming exists, just for context for council, and then asked for some direction around how we move forward with future memorial programs, and so that we can kind of develop a policy to support that. Some of the key points worth noting is currently within the scope of the memorial bench program, for instance, it's the users or residents that are looking to memorialize someone, that actually have to purchase the whole bench. And so what we proposed with this different policy would be that the city would be the owner of the benches, and that residents could purchase the plaque, which is, allows the city a little bit more flexibility in where we site benches. And also it doesn't require the resident to come pick up a bench following the end of their term for the memorial. And it would probably be a little bit more cost efficient for the end user as well. Just for a little additional context, right now I think it's around $2,700 for a bench under the program, and that doesn't totally capture the total install costs for the city for doing the bench program. So this is a way for us to, fully own the benches and be able to site according to our outdoor parks and recreation plan, and then also have a lower cost option for residents. So that was one of the main policy directions that we were requesting, and there were some others as well. I'm just going to have a look. So we did also suggest not to have any additional benches in the existing locations, because some of them have quite a few, and there are other areas in the communities that are undersubscribed. And then the allowance of donations to community amenities for the people could do in memoriam, to kind of add to flexibility for people to be able to memorialize in different ways. And there was just a note regarding the other existing programs that are currently on pause for logistical and planning reasons. So the information, again, was provided to council for direction and just opportunity to get your feedback on how that policy moves forward.
So basically what we're passing tonight is just direction and recommendations for that policy that we'll be bringing back to council at a later time.
The policy is an administrative one, so it doesn't get to come to policy to council for approval, but it can be provided to council. So essentially we're looking for your input on what that administrative policy looks like, just because memorials are kind of more of a sensitive piece in the community.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Adey?
I have a couple of questions. One is there anything currently preventing somebody from exercising the option to make a donation to an amenity that you're contemplating in here to put it in policy? Is there a reason why people can't do that anyway?
Not necessarily. It just isn't provisioned for in a way that kind of guides and directs people in that way. So we definitely have had people donate to different community amenities previously.
Okay.
And I'm not quite finished, but so I assume it would just raise the profile of that as an option for people. My other question is around the way you've broken it down into the three services: the memorial benches, the Millennium Walkway Memorial, and the Mariners Memorial. If I understand it, there is currently, I know that there is currently a freeze on expanding the Millennium Walkway Memorial services. So I have a couple of questions about that. I know there's one concrete, I'm not sure what we call them, concrete wall available with 60 spaces still open. So I'm curious about why we would freeze the program if those spaces are still open. And maybe it relates to the second part of my question is, do we have numbers on how many people are lined up waiting for these, an opportunity to put plaques in these places? Because I'm wondering if we couldn't easily deal with the number that are on the waiting list that way.
I am not entirely sure about the Millennium Walkway walls, if there is a list of people interested. I do know that there was roughly 10 or 11 that were interested in benches, to my understanding, from our customer service staff. I'm not aware of the Millennium Walkway, and I might redirect the question regarding overall planning to Director Pucci. Thanks. Sorry, I missed that.
No problem. Thank you. Through the chair, so there is a waiting list for plaques on the Millennium Walkway. We are aware of that. I'm not sure what they're at right now. The issue was that we didn't want to take residents' money for a plaque and then change the program right away. So we are looking at new planning down in that area, coming from the waterfront park all the way in towards the cruise ship dock and further down. And if those walls are discontinued and we go and with another option like moving it to the side, the city side instead of the water side in order to have better viewscape, then we would want to not take people's money and have them there. We would just put it into the new program moving forward. So we are looking at a design program with our partners for the waterfront park starting in March. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I can follow up on that. I'm not sure I'm understanding. If we'll take the wall that's currently empty and where it is. Are you imagining a prospect where we would make the kinds of changes that would have us moving those walls? Because if that's the case, I guess I would. I'm not sure I can imagine what else you would do down there. And I'll come back to it. I guess what I'm saying is, as my piece of input, I would very much like that third piece of the program to be opened back up, because I know that that's been a source of frustration for people for a number of years now. And I can imagine that it must be even more frustrating when they walk down there and they see the empty concrete there. So my input would be, I'd like to see us find a way to open that up, even in my opinion, even if it includes proceeding on the old model, knowing that a new model is on the way.
Before I go to Councillor Forrester, some of our fans have just been emailing me that there's no sound on Channel 10. We've got to keep our audience at home happy. I don't know if we can do anything about it. Go ahead, Councillor Forrester.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Quite a few of my comments were actually quite similar to Councillor Eadie, so I won't reiterate the questions. I have one question, and I would also echo his comment. If we can open up a program that people have been waiting for some time, I would like to see that. My question is about taxation, where we talked about in memoriam, instead of me maybe doing a bench or something else, if I go and I support a different city program, do I get a tax receipt? Is there a process, or will this whole plan and policy include how that would be? So if I went and donated money to the rec center, or I donated money to the Sunken Gardens, or one of them, do I get a tax receipt? Is there a way of doing that? Or is that part of what we're going to get to as a recommendation?
Director Bauman, I assume.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, people can contact me if people are donating money for city programs. We can write tax receipts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Reid Skelton Morvan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think this program is great, and maintaining that flexibility I think is going to be paramount too, because there'll be some folks that will want to purchase and make the contribution, but there'll also be those that, maybe $2,700 and change or whichever the price kind of came around to might not be as accessible. So those that are then responsible for the plaque, then it kind of opens the doors for both angles, because I know there's been a few inquiries, even to myself as well, that have been brought up in past meetings and other discussions, where folks that have wanted to not necessarily subscribe to the wall, but to add a bench and in memoriam to a passed on relative and things like that. So I think with these pieces, when it comes to the empty spaces. If we're going to end up relocating that, I think that's going to be something important. It's an important consideration because we definitely don't want to be insensitives and then moving a memoriam that already has plaques on it. It's one thing if it's like falling apart and decrepit, but with the one that it's looking like it's in decent shape, it's just empty. I think try to find a safe middle ground if possible. But I know that a lot of the feedback that I've been hearing regarding that is also that, the viewscape is a big part of why folks are kind of almost preferring it to be on the other side of the walkway. So I just wanted to thank Manager Stewart for the report and the update and recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Forrester?
I'm so sorry, I forgot something I was going to flag. I really enjoyed the feedback, but there was only one person that said to get rid of the program. Is that right? Like there was only one response that indicated that there wasn't a need or they didn't think we should be keeping names. I'm just wondering if there was any verbal feedback, because I hadn't heard that in my conversations, and it just it seemed like an anomaly to me. Not seeing anybody looking like they heard differently. I just thought it was interesting. Is there a plan to ask for further feedback from the community? Because I don't know that everybody in the community even noticed that there was a survey. Just based on the number of people that have suddenly reached out to me, I just wonder if they didn't see it to begin with.
To my recollection, there was only the one person who suggested canceling the program. Generally speaking, sometimes when you put out surveys, it's the people who are very invested and interested in that particular thing that will respond. This actually did receive more feedback than quite a lot of our other surveys. So relatively speaking, this is actually a pretty well responded to survey. So maybe not everybody did see it, but it was, we did have decent feedback. So we hadn't intended on doing another engagement. We just were going to take the feedback that we received and kind of develop policy and go from there with council's support.
That's it? Okay, my input in this is there's been some either miscommunication or misinterpretation of the 10-year limit and things like that. Now, is that just for the benches, or is, some people were saying, well, I wouldn't have bought a plaque if I'd known it was only going to be for 10 years. And I said, well, I think it's for perpetuality, but I'm not 100% sure. So
I do know that for the benches, it has historically been 10 years. I don't know if we do have a similar time parameter for the other program, so I'm going to look to Director Pucci on that.
Thank you. Through the chair, no, there's no time limit on any other memoriam like the plaques or the bricks. Those are perpetual. Thank you.
Okay, I know there's a lot of questions in that. I don't know, do we want to pass this motion tonight or table it and have staff come back with a more complete report? It's first and seconder. Pass it? Okay.
Well, no, I'll speak to your question. I think we're being asked to provide input, and I think that's what we're doing. So I think that's the intent of the motion, so I don't see a reason not to pass it tonight.
Yeah, okay. All in favor? Oh, I thought you two moved in second. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, all in favor? I am getting to that adjournment fast. Okay, the next report's from Deputy City Manager, and it's administrative penalties from on city permits for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've been asked to give a little bit of a brief synopsis of the report so that everyone is aware and the members of the public at home can, if they haven't seen the agenda, can hear what this is about. So just as a synopsis, the Ministry of Environment has recently inspected the city's provincially held permits. As a result, we received 3 administrative penalties, one for the Wantage Road landfill of $26,000, one for our sewer outfalls of $18,460, and one for our Prince Rupert landfill of $121,000. An administrative penalty is a monetary penalty imposed on a permit holder, which is the city. Within 30 days, we can request an opportunity to be heard, and we have done that on all three of these penalties. The city has more than the average number of permits compared to other communities of our size. We are somewhat unique because we have federal permits and provincial permits, and sometimes they do not align. For instance, our community being on the water isn't the same as a community on the inland. For Wantage Road, this landfill is unlined, so it does not have a liner on the bottom of it, and it is a historic dump site that was permitted in the early 70s. It was the primary dump site for the city between 1970 and 1990. Since its closure, the city occasionally used it as a place to dump surplus clean soil, that's inert clean soil. Historic, industrial, and commercial activities are noted in the area. There was a former gravel quarry, historic United States Army munitions buildings, and the Prince Rupert Golf Course, which used waste, municipal solid waste, to construct greens and fairways back in the day. During COVID-19, the ministry unilaterally replaced our old dump order with a new permit, which required the city to manage the site differently. We went from a cost of next to nothing annually, just doing small monitoring, to approximately $120,000 per year, and that is the recent 3 years we've spent about that. The challenges with this site is that there's no way to trace any contamination to a single point of origin. Therefore, staff are suggesting a more robust closure plan, more monitoring wells, and a rigorous monitoring program to narrow any search for contamination. This will cost likely in the neighborhood of $8 million over the years to close the site adequately, but likely will not solve the problem. Permit 5577 is our sewer outfall permit. Much like the city's water system, the existing system is deteriorating and dates back to the early 1900s. Our sewer system is divided into 10 sewer areas, each with a piped discharge into the Prince Rupert Harbor, and we discharge raw untreated sewer into the harbor. Like all other city infrastructure, this system operates in a semi-failure state, and we have multiple breaks per week on that system. The city has a federal directive mandating the construction of wastewater treatment by 2030. The challenge with the city's outfall system is that it will be non-compliant until sewer treatment is deployed in 2030. The city is working with the BC regulators, which is the province of British Columbia, and the federal government under a federal directive to eliminate outfall J and C and implement our wetland pilot treatment facility. Further, staff are working on a plan with partners to remove the trunk main out of McClymont Park, which was the major source of this penalty. Lastly, we have our Prince Rupert landfill. That is permit 7988. The city owns and operates the landfill. This landfill was commissioned in 1991 after the closure of our Wantage Road landfill. And depending on recycling and waste volumes, we will be operational for a life of 50 plus years to come. Since 2017, the ministry has been increasing threshold requirements associated with leachate quality, the last being done during the construction of our current treatment lagoon system, which significantly hampered us when it went into operation. The increase in thresholds by the ministry and volumes due to rain have taken our once compliant system out of compliance. Further, the city opened an on-site liquid waste site to support dumping of septic waste. This septic site was operational for approximately 6 months before it experienced an event that led it to closure. The city staff, under advisement of our consultant, clean tested and reopened the pond. However, this facility is contributing to our non-compliant discharges. Unfortunately, with annual rainfall of approximately 3,000 millimeters per year, managing stormwater and leachate have become extremely challenging. Coupled with the new liquid waste facility, tidal constraints and cold weather patterns means the site has challenges maintaining compliance year-round. The site is compliant during spring and summer months, and work to facilitate a full year-round compliance is not insurmountable. Staff estimate the timeline of at least 1 year and approximately $2 million and plan subject to ministry approval. We have started this process and we are working on designs right now. In response to the city's situation, our consultant has suggested 3 options regarding liquid waste. We can temporarily halt septic disposal until the lagoon system is compliant. It also allows time to complete the necessary upgrades to the facility, but haulers will have to seek dump sites in other municipalities. Option 2 is to continue accepting liquid waste but keep the lagoon's valves closed and store it until the lagoon is operational, which is in the spring. This will require additional measures, significant pumping costs, and regular checks by our staff. It also risks another wildlife incident or spills. And 3, continue accepting septic waste at our site as it is an approved activity under our authorization. Given that we cannot turn off the tap on leachate generation, the site could continue to operate. The council must be aware that this is contributing to our non-compliant discharges and we could be additionally fined. So to reiterate, most of the challenges noted in this report are due to factors outside of our control, like weather and increased permit requirements. Staff have already started correcting issues on some of the permits and some of the penalties, like increased litter pickup by operations and more landfill monitoring associated with Hayes Creek. We are also trying to work with the ministry to reduce the penalties and work towards compliance. So I'm happy to answer any questions associated with this.
Any questions? Oh, well, I guess we should ask for the motion first, and then we'll go into discussion. So the recommended motion is that council receives this report for information purposes and directs the staff on their preferred path forward at the Prince Rupert landfill. Councillor Randawa and Councillor Forrester.
Mr. Chair, I think that this motion actually needs council to choose between 1, 2, or 3 in terms of options. So rather than say that the direct staff to on their preferred path, you choose the option 1, 2, or 3, knowing the pros and cons. Otherwise, we don't know what we'll be doing without.
Well, preferred path is 1, 2, or 3. So
yeah, well, path 1, 2, or 3. We need to know which option.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think that'll be in the discussion we're going to have right now.
Okay. Well, okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Adey.
If I understand the procedural piece, somebody is going to have to make a motion in favor of 1, 2, or 3. Is that correct?
Okay.
Okay. And I agree that we'll probably get there, but it might be easier to do that if we have a chance to ask questions first. And I'll preface my opinion about the 3 options and say that I don't like any of them very much, but here we are. So if, with the chair's permission, I have a couple of questions. What I'm gathering around the reason we're here with this problem, and I don't like the problem at all, is at least in part because the regulations that set the standards by which we do this work, they've moved the goalposts, as it were, and made it so that you have to kick the soccer ball a lot further to get it in the goal. Terrible metaphor. So I guess I'm curious about how they roll out these changes in terms of the requirements, in terms of the information they give to municipalities. Do they say that there is a change coming 1 calendar year from now? You need to take steps to get to compliance, and you have time to do that. Do they just send you a memo saying next week the game's different? Because it seems to me that every time they make a change like that, it means we need time to make changes, and it's going to cost us some money. So I'm just wondering, as a sort of a first question around this, how do the two levels of government communicate these requirements in terms of giving us a chance to respond? Perhaps through the mayor, I'm directing that to the city manager.
ahead,
Mr.
Dr.
Chair,
Butler.
I'll defer that to Deputy City Manager.
Thank you. So through the chair, there's different ways. I have been invited for consultation with both the ministry and the federal government before on new regulations, but it's an exercise that it's when you get into that sort of level, there's multiple people in that consultation group. And the unfortunate piece is that it's one size fits all. That's the approach. So if you look at our community, which has, like I said, over 3,000 millimeters of rain, and you look at a community like Kelowna, they probably don't see any leachate in their pond at all. It's dry, completely dry. And so they don't have the same challenges that we do. They also don't have saltwater discharge like we do, and that's why we have competing priorities. Is that we have the Fisheries Act, we have also our permits, federal and provincial, and so unfortunately, it is one size fits all. Most other communities are it's a lot easier for them to be compliant, and even with some of the changes that come in over the years, they're still compliant without any changes at all because they're not seeing any leachate coming off of their site. So communities like ours are it's really tough for us to keep up. Thank you.
So I'll follow up in terms of what we're being asked to is really narrow in the sense that it's talking about the liquid waste. We've got a sort of a menu of things that we're being penalized for. And I suppose each one of them warrants some discussion, but in terms of the liquid waste and the three options you've given, if we close it, then what that will mean, if I understand it correctly, is that the companies that haul the liquid waste that would normally dispose of it there will have to haul it somewhere else. And I would assume that means additional costs for them. And I would further assume that what that means is that they would pass those additional costs on to their clients, from whom they get the liquid waste in the first place. So I guess my thought is the second option. Let's continue accepting the liquid waste, but we're going to hold it. It's like in a holding pen, as it were. So my question about that is, how long can we do that before that's no longer viable? And I might be tempted to suggest that be the short-term thing that we do, but ultimately we may end up with option one, which is we'll have to stop it. What I don't really feel like we can, in good conscience, just carry on being non-compliant. That's my gut feeling about that third option. So to stop talking about it and ask a direct question, I say, how long can we do option two before option one becomes necessary?
Thank you, through the chair. So I think just so everyone is sort of aware of the situation, is that we during the winter months have to do non-compliant discharges. We have to do them. It's raining outside right now. Our ponds get full, and our treatment, the bugs aren't actively doing what they should because it's cold outside and there's too much rain, so we have to discharge. So we are doing discharges. What this does, what we're asking is that we hold as much as we can, and then we pump it onto the active phase, which will then percolate through the waste and just sort of almost take more time to get through to hit the lagoon. So that's what option two would be. The question about how much time, we are doing that right now we got these non-compliances in mid-December, and we knew that we had to stop doing automatic discharges with this waste, so we've been holding it, and we've asked the local haulers to only take what's necessary to us right now, and they've done that. And I think that we could probably continue this exercise of holding it for another month or two, but I think we can buy more time by taking if it becomes freeboard over the gravel that's actually in the pit, we could pump that out, put it into the active phase. But there is a cost for that. There's a man cost to that, a diesel cost to that, a pumping cost to that. So we could continue to do it until fair weather, but it depends on how much we intake, how much rain we get, and all that, and how quickly the ponds fill up to pump out. Not sure if that answered it or not, Councillor.
Councillor Forrester?
Thanks. I appreciate the answers we're getting to questions. It's flagged a couple of other questions for me. So when we temporarily paused for the short term when there was the challenge, do we know how much it cost the different contractors to take it elsewhere? Have we had any semblance of how much we would be offloading into other people? And then I have a second question.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, no, I don't know the exact cost. I mean, we know what the cost to the rate or their bylaw rate in other communities would be to dump, but we don't know what the overall cost for transit and bringing it there are. No, we don't, unfortunately.
Thank you. My next question, there was mention of a cost for doing the additional pumping. How much of an additional cost? Is that something that we can meet with the contractors and see perhaps temporarily while we're in this sticky situation? The people that are sending the waste through them, because a lot of them is corporations. This isn't waste coming from my house, is my understanding. This is businesses. Is there a way of calculating how much that extra cost is and meeting with some of those contractors so that then the average everyday taxpayer isn't bearing that cost?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, yeah, we can figure out that cost. Again, we really don't know how much we will have to do, how many times we'll have to do it, and how much that will be until we until we know how much dumping there's going to be. So I think one of the things that I can take away is figure out a per hour cost and figure out what the rate of intake we're having right now, figure out exactly how long we have left of freeboard time before we'll have to do our first pump, and then how much time that will buy us. We can take that away. Thank you.
So then, because ultimately we want to get option 1, 2, or 3, I'm leaning more to option 2 with the understanding that we do whatever we can to make sure that your average taxpayer isn't paying for businesses. Because I think we need to find somewhat of a happy medium so that then we're not offloading costs onto people that have nothing to do with the cost that's being incurred. Thanks.
Councillor Randall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm leaning towards option 2 too. So instead of option 1 closing or option 3 just take risk. So option 2 looks good too. That way we can keep on buying some time, and also we can support our local residents, right? They can have better choice, local business. Otherwise they have to shut down, and we have local people, they have to call from other option. So I'm leaning towards option 2, but we have some questions like Councillor Foster asked now how much that cost extra. So I'm not sure we should pass today or we should wait for another meeting until we get all the answers.
Okay, Councillor Reid Skelton Morvan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to speak specifically to a particular choice, one over another. I think the one piece that I think that I'm sure was probably already been anticipated and something that we'll be exploring with the discussions with the Ministry of Environment But is there a way, I think even just kind of highlighting, looking at the pieces of what that would look like, a phased approach working towards that? Because obviously a heavy capital investment like that is not realistic right now. And then offsetting some kind of, even kind of an interim, not necessarily a waiver, but maybe, I guess, in a sense it would be. But just given the circumstances, maybe a more equitable solution. Because obviously our situation is quite unique. It's very different in comparison to a lot of other communities that do not experience this. Unless the Ministry of Environment has a recipe for it to stop raining, basically, I don't think we're going to have any kind of immediate solution on that front. Either we're going to be facing challenges, and I'm sure it's no mystery to them that we are going through quite a process to try to get to compliance, at least on a wastewater management, because we're twinning the lines and other things like that. But when it comes to the sewage aspect the landfill aspects, I mean, obviously we're very unique in comparison to other communities. So yeah, just like I said, a little piece around so maybe an equitable solution or a waiver or something in the interim to put in the agreement so that we're not using all of that capital that could be used as a phased approach into this infrastructure investment instead of just getting penalized and then also having to spend the money at the same time when they know that we're in the situation that we're in. Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Buchan?
Mr. Chair, I'd note that option 2, we don't have certainty around how long that will work, but we're hopeful, if we're lucky, that it may get us through to the spring when it starts to work again. But we don't know. It's possible that we will be back to you if option 2 doesn't give us the time that we hope it will. In the meantime, we can gather some additional information in terms of how much it would cost to haul to an appropriate disposal site, which may be in Terrace. And we may have the results from our opportunity to be heard, where we present the unique and extenuating circumstances that our community faces. We'll be able to report back on that in any event, but I would think that we should get the result of that within a couple of months. Is that about correct, Deputy City Manager?
Thank you. We'll know back from the opportunity to be heard within 60 days. And just to answer a couple of the questions, Councillor, through the chair. So we always ask, I've done a couple of the opportunities to be heard before, and we always request that the penalties that we request that the penalties be used to better our situation, and we've been successful with getting that as an augment to the penalty in the past, where they've allowed us to use the penalty money to either purchase equipment that may better our situation. So we've requested that. We've obviously requested to reduce the penalty if possible, but if not possible, that money be used to purchase equipment or do something that would better our situation and get us back more towards compliance. Thank you.
Well, I've got lots of questions, but the first one, this is all around the liquid waste. And that's a relatively new addition to our landfill, is it not? And who designed it and who built it?
Through the chair, it was Sperling Hansen designed it, and it was built. I don't remember who actually constructed it, but it was designed through Sperling Hansen.
So my question is there any liability responsible to who built it and designed it? Because here we are getting the fines after we've had consultants, my favorite word, and engineers design something for us that's not working. And they were aware of our rainfall. Like the questions we had on the one we're designing right now kept coming up over and over and over again. Can it handle our rainfall? And here is an aspect of our landfill that was designed and built supposedly according to handle all this. And now we're standing here with a piece of paper that says we owe money because of fines from their design and that. So why are we struggling with this when we should be going back to them and saying, you designed it, you figure a way out for us? That's my first big question, and I don't think there's an answer to it, but I just get tired of us spending all this money on consulting and then different things come back and bite us in the butt. It's we think nothing of 20, 30, 40, $50,000 for consulting fees to design something, and then something like this happens. The other aspect of it is, and I asked this earlier, and you were going to check into it. I don't know if we got an answer yet, but there was a sewage outlet up in the industrial site that was being used, and we stopped using it. And I understand it has a catch and everything for solids and things like that. Can we not use that on a short term for a short period of time to find out if one of these other three options are acceptable?
Thank you. Through the chair, I did look into that, and I think we've only used it once in the past, well, definitely in the past 5 years, that our deputy director of operations has been in with the city, and I don't remember a time that we used it before that, and it overcame the system with using that. So it's not a viable solution. We have looked at that treatment facility, the small one in the industrial site, as an option for upgrade, that it could be used for that in the future, and a card lock system where like the other communities have that, where you have a card lock and come in and use it. And that is something that we want to look at for another option for us in the future, but it cannot be used as a replacement for the system we have right now.
Okay, going back to the outlets, it's not as big a fine as the liquid waste, but if we've got to 2030 to become compliant, is that correct? Then why are we getting fined for something that we've got to 2030 to fix?
Through the chair, so the penalty that we have associated with the outfalls has to do with Hayes Creek and the McClymont trunk main that goes through there, which we are in the process right now of looking at a partnership to have that relocated and removed.
Well, I see three separate, you've got permit 4454 Wantage Road landfill, and that's Hayes Creek, leachage into Hayes Creek. But I also see for the top one, which permit is that now? That's permit 5577, sewer outfalls, sewage discharge into aquatic environment. We've been doing that for the last 100 years, and they're saying we've got to have a sewer treatment plant by 2030. So they're fining us for sewage discharge into an aquatic environment when it's been done for the last X number of years, and we're not the only city in Canada doing that. And is this an Environment Canada fine or an MOE fine?
Through the chair, this is MOE fine, and this one is associated with the spill into Hayes Creek. It's not associated with the spill, not at the end of pipe into the ocean. It's that one for our outfalls is associated with into Hayes Creek.
Because the 4454 is Wantage Road landfill, and it I understood that to be leakage into Hayes Creek from the last X number of years and from industrial use and everything up there. And then 5577, it says outflows, flow of outflows. And then you're talking about closing down outfill J, L, and C in the next 2 years. So I'm getting a little confused here.
Thank you. Through the chair. So I was just updating on the work that we will be doing associated with that permit in general, but the actual fine associated with this is sewer discharge into an aquatic environment, and that aquatic environment, it was Hayes Creek. There was a spill that happened in Hayes Creek where the pipe is elevated in the walkway or in the trail that's in there, and we had a spill in there, and we've had and it says multiple years because in the last couple of years we've had a few of them, and we're still working on the plan to get it out. We are working with a partner to try and get that pipe out of that environment very soon.
That's a pipe that goes over the creek down by the bridge.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the trail.
Okay.
The one that there's an elevated section that's in the
Yeah.
trail.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fine. And so, yeah, and, you know, going back to the liability for the design and building and engineering of it, I'd like to get an answer on that, why we're being responsible for something that we paid to have designed and built. It's just kind of curious that we didn't actually design it or build it, and that, yet we're stuck holding the thing. Oh, Dr. Buchan first, sorry.
Yeah, we'll bring information back on that question when we come back to council.
Okay. Dr. Reed, Councillor Reed Skelton-Morvan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've been bestowed an honorary PhD. I appreciate it. Yeah. I was just going to thank DCM Pucci for his comments and response regarding that. I think just a kind of a note for folks at home that there's a strenuous asset management plan that we have for replacing the infrastructure and all of the other things that we're tackling. But a lot of these uniqueness and one-off kind of experiences based on our climate, our location and geography and all of the other pieces and muskeg and everything else. There's some pieces that kind of take into account, but I also wanted to note that I think it might be worthwhile, given that the North Coast MLA is actually now the Minister of Environment. I think there's a opportunity now to have dialogue with a new team and things like that to work towards and have almost a completed proposal, so we have a solution, so we're not constantly getting fined year over year. Which I imagine staff is already kind of in the works, but more so just to note that to have almost a completed project per se, and kind of what the finances is going to look like for a staff to go this route. Some options of what that would look like in a phased, how much capital we have to spend year over year, given options 1, 2, and 3. I don't know if there's a way to kind of incorporate this into the motion, if there's a 2A or a 3A or however we want to do this, but to add those components into that so that we have an interim solution, but also working towards something long-term as well.
Mr. Chair, I don't think that motion needs to be made. I think that we take that away. We are working on quite a number of infrastructure asks and initiatives with the federal and provincial governments.
Well, I'm quite confident.
That works.
I'm quite confident our staff will be going up to bat and trying to get everything we can for it. I have the utmost confidence, and I also know that Director Pucci is definitely being groundbreaking in a lot of things with MOE. So, I think they'll listen to him. But okay, Councillor Forrester. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, well, do we want to? Oh, sorry, Councillor Adey.
I think we need to make a motion. So
That's
based on what I'm hearing, I'll make a motion that, with the understanding that it might turn out to be just a short-term provisional step, that we select option 2 going forward.
Second? Okay.
Yeah. If we don't have a seconder, I could second that.
Okay. All in favor? It's passed. There you go. Okay, now we come to the favorite part from some people, of the round table. Knights of the round table, go ahead. Councillor Adey.
I have actually 2 or 3 things. I'll start with a request from the Leicester Centre Board, specifically the chair. In the past, we have had a model where the funding that we provide for the Leicester Centre, and I think also the museum, but I'm talking about the Leicester Centre in this case, that the funding be delineated over a 3-year term, whereas many of the smaller community grants are annually based, but the Leicester Centre obviously is a significant asset, but also a significant expense. So we have an agreement in the budget that will go through the normal process that will stand as the eventual arrangement for this year. And I would like to make a motion that we ask the corporate administrator to undertake a discussion with the Lester Center to bring back what an additional second year and third year might look like if we go to a multi-year agreement with the Lester Center. So that's a motion. Do you want me to?
Could I ask that the administrator be replaced with staff in that motion?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll just make the case in favor of a multi-year agreement that with an institution like the Lester Center, there is a lot of planning in terms of who you're going to bring in to perform, what kind of events you're going to put on that extend into a year, 2 years, sometimes even 3 years down the road. And it becomes very difficult to make strategic investments in those events if you're not sure what the number is for the following year or the year after. So I think it makes managing those institutions much easier, and you can do it more effectively. So I would hope that we'll come back with a recommendation that works. But I do want to just clarify, I'm not suggesting that we turn it into making commitments for increases or anything of the kind. I just want a recommendation in terms of whether it's possible to structure something like that, and then we would make those determinations when the motion comes back.
Okay. Just one thing. When we sort of separated enhancement grants, and there was the big three. Library went to taxes. I believe it was the golf course, the museum, and the Performing Arts Theater were put on longer term contracts for stability. And it seems to have varied a little bit. But I'm quite sure if we do it with one, we should be looking at doing them with all three, because I know the others will be right on their heels looking at it. Because those are the three or sort of activities or assets the city has that we have continued to fund over many years. And because of the instability of short term, they could not plan long term like Councillor Adey is talking about. So I think if we're going to do it for one, we might have to do it for the other two as well. Just because I know if we give it something like that to one in that group, the others are going to be coming back and saying, "Can we get it too?" Go ahead.
So I would make the procedural point that if you are suggesting an amendment to the motion, that might be how you get to what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to add that if the first and seconder agree to it. Okay. Okay, now go ahead.
I just had a couple of questions, and I don't know if perhaps I directed at you and then Dr. Buck, and I don't know who answers, but I'll tell you my question. What are the risks with doing that? We've already heard that would specify that there's no commitments for annual increases. I'm assuming risk would be what happens if for some reason we have quite a bit less money. So are we committing ourselves to money that perhaps maybe we don't have for 3 years? And so how would we navigate that? So not saying no, I'm very much interested in exploring this option. And maybe it's that we need to have staff make a report with how that would look like before we actually vote on whether or not we would do it. But I'm really interested in the cons.
Dr. Bucker?
Mr. Chair, normally we don't see motions coming out of the council roundtable because of a lack of information. It's what we see community updates or expressions of interest in looking at something a little bit further. A notice of motion. What I would like to recommend is that there be a notice of motion for a staff report on this budgeting question of long term for the Lesser Center, and staff can put together a report for council with more information, so council can make have more information before they make a decision.
Go ahead, Councillor Ray.
I have no problem with that. I brought it forward, but I also understand that because this year's funding is in place, we have some time to develop it. That would be fine with me. So if I'm withdrawing the motion, I guess I'm withdrawing the motion, but I am asking for that to come to a future meeting.
So basically, we're given staff direction to do a report, is how we'd see it? Okay, thank you.
I did have one more, and I'm sure that it could come from any one of us. Could we have an update on the current boil water advisory and whether there's an end in sight sometime soon?
Mm-hmm. Pardon me?
I've asked a question. Perhaps
Okay.
DCM Pucci could answer it.
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. So at this time right now, we are still under the boil water advisory. We are working to try and get reliable power over to the other side, which is preventing us from getting off the advisory. We are bringing back online one of our main feed pipes. So what I can do is we can go back and take a look at timelines and put out a notice tomorrow of an update for all of the community. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we are going through winter months and lots of potholes pops up, like one on Hayesco by the Henry by Island. So I'm wondering if we have any plans to fix those ones soon. Dr. Buchan?
Mr. Chair, I'll defer that to DCM Pucci.
Staff are out regularly doing pothole repair. We did fix that one, I know, last week, and it's already shown its true colors again, and I drove over it yesterday as well. So we'll get the team back out looking at the trouble spots and get on those. Thank you.
Councillor Forrester?
Thank you. Two things. Question. I've been being asked by a lot of people for an update on the potential roundabout. Have we heard anything recently, or is it still to be determined?
Dr. Buchan?
Thank you, through the chair. We don't have an update, a formal update from the ministry. We are making minister meetings coming up at the beginning of February, and we'll have new updates after that. I know that it's all the new ministers are getting well acquainted with their portfolios. However, I know that asking the staff that the roundabout is still a budget item and it has not been taken away. And the last I heard that it was going to be going out for tender in February, but we will confirm that with the minister at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And then my last thing is a positive thing. One of my favorite young people chose to come and observe council today. So I just wanted to invite other young people in our community. If you want to learn more about municipal politics, please come. It's not boring. It's a lot of fun.
Maybe we should ask for a written report. Okay, I've already said it once and I'll say it again. I just appreciate the response. Our staff, fire department, RCMP, and everyone with the Sherbrooke apartment, and the follow-up with Joyce Charlton through Victim Services. 3 of us counselors, 4 of us counselors went to luncheon put on by Macro, and of 60, 70 people there, give or take a few. there was only 2 questions asked, and I was amazed. So that meant that our staff and victim services and that had done their job. It's still an ongoing situation, but it's really nice to see how fast and efficiently our staff at 3:34 in the morning on Christmas morning responded to that. I think it's accolades to them. And with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Forrester and Reed Skelton Morvan, all in favor? Thank you.